Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We are so glad to have you with us today for our final Meet Your Museum program. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Rachel, and I work with the education team at the Natural History Museum and La Brea Tar Pits Museum. For the past few weeks, our Meet Your Museum programs have been presented in partnership with Los Angeles County Office of Education's Engaging Girls in STEM initiative. And we've been highlighting some of the amazing female scientists, researchers, and curators at La Brea Tar Pits, the sister museum to the Natural History Museum. Today, we're meeting with a special guest from our museum. The Natural History Museum and La Brea Tar Pits Museum are home to over 35 million objects and specimens, and these collections are used to conduct research, be put on display in exhibitions, or play a part in programs that we develop. Each staff member has a special area of focus for their work, but together, they are helping to build and share the history of life on our planet. In just a moment, we're going to hear from Laura Tewksbury, Senior Preparator at La Brea Tar Pits Project 23, where she is responsible for excavating fossils, general site management, training and supervising volunteers and students, and sharing her expertise with the public. Her educational background focused on both evolutionary biology and American Sign Language interpreting. She loves sharing her enthusiasm for science and 15 years of work at the La Brea Tar Pits in her secondary role as Science Communications Liaison. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can meet our presenter today, and you'll see me again in a little bit. Hi, Laura.
Hello, thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I am not doing it perfectly, of course, even though we just practiced. I'm just going to make it small and then make it big again. See if that fixes it. Oh, marvelous. Thank you so much. All right. So yes, hello, my name is Laura Tewksbury, and I work over at the La Brea Tar Pits. And today I really wanted to kind of pull in just kind of a more broader subject, because you may have seen last week where my coworker Myrene, who's also works at the Tar Pits, she kind of got more into the Tar Pits and the work that we do there. So I wanted to kind of bring it even broader into why I love science and why I want you to love it too. And so I promise I won't have a lot of text, but this one I thought was important. So I wanted to just remind everybody that science is a tool that all of us can use. You can use it to understand how the world works, share your experiences with other people, or solve problems. Science isn't memorizing facts. It's using organized methods to help build greater understanding. And now to the cute baby picture. And so for me growing up, especially with women in STEM as being our subject right now, one of my main role models was my grandmother, who just passed last year, who was a computer scientist, which was very rare to be a computer scientist and a woman in the field at the time. But if you've ever used something like, GPS, then you're welcome. A lot of the work that she did is what later set the foundation for that type of technology. And but here, on the other hand, you see me dressed up more after my grandfather's pastime, because again, whereas my grandmother doing computer science was very math heavy, so it was a little bit harder for me as a small child to grab onto. My grandfather, after he retired from the Air Force, became an archaeologist. And from him, I really got my love of getting my hands dirty and also using science to help tell stories. And you can see here that I also have a drawing that I did as a child of what I wanted a scientist to be. And I definitely decided that that was what I was going to look like as well. And I wanted to just kind of point out that if you fast forward 20-ish years or so, I even got the hat right. So this is me protected from the sun, working at a fossil site. And I even got the pink hat right. So I really thought that that was cute. And so growing up, I was fortunate enough to have a lot of different opportunities that my parents and my school and my community really made available to me. One of them being a program at the time that was called the Future Scientists and Engineers of America. And that really gave us opportunities to work with people currently working in the sciences in many different ways to kind of see how varied the science community was and how easy and accessible a lot of the processes that they did were. And here's me at a marine science lab actually looking at small, beautiful phytoplankton under a microscope. And I was also able to go to the Science Festival for Girls that was set up by this central figure, which is Dr. Sally Ride, who on June 18th of 1983 became the first American woman in space. And she wanted to then also encourage other young women to proceed into the STEM fields. So these science festivals that she helped establish had a variety of speakers. And I was looking at the old program of one of the ones that I was able to attend. And one of our speakers happened to be Dr. Lucy Jones, the seismologist here in Los Angeles, who is also one of our 2 honorees that our museum had for our Women in Science and Culture just a couple of weeks ago. So I liked that kind of little cassette together. And I also wanted to really send a shout out to the Girl Scouts, which I didn't do in younger grades. I actually only joined in middle and high school. But the opportunities that it gave me for really building my teamwork capabilities and just community building in general, I think were incredibly valuable. And bonus, it was kind of the first time I had the opportunity to go camping. So I will never forget the opportunities it gave me to explore the natural world in different ways. And then I wanted to come in and talk about another project I was able to work on. So I grew up in Southern Orange County, California, so a little bit south of Los Angeles. And while I was in high school, one of the local elementary schools had a brand new principal that has switched in and set up a lot of grants for a lot of amazing programs. And one of them was a paleontology-based program where they took a fossil whale from a local construction site and actually built an entire paleontology program at that elementary school. And I was in high school at the time, so a bit old, but what we were able to work out with my school counselors was actually that I was able to leave school early during 6th period, and my parents would then drive me over a couple times a week to go work, volunteer at the Splash Project, both helping to write curriculum and working with the younger kids on the fossil and working with the paleontologist Greg Seymour at the time, and also just myself getting to actually work on the fossil. And so it's a little bit older than the fossils I work on now. This one is estimated to be about 4 to 9 million years old. But at the same time, I really think that it is one of the things that really encouraged me to be like, yes, this is something that I can do and I love doing. And I also love sharing with others, because it wasn't just that I got to work on it. It was that I got to help teach other people to work on it as well. And then when I went off to college, I'm in school forever. I'm one of those people. But the degrees that I did finish are associate's degrees from some of the local community colleges in Southern California. And Southern California has a lot of construction and development, and there's a lot of legislation or laws in the books in California that help protect non-renewable resources like fossils that are found at construction sites and making sure that they are kept safe. And because there's been so much development in Southern California for the last couple of decades, that means there's a lot of these fossils that are found. And 2 of the community college that I went to actually were able to work with some of the paleontologists who worked on those construction sites, just like many of my friends and colleagues nowadays that are paleo monitors, which are the paleontologists specially trained to go before, during, and after the big excavation equipment. And they're the ones who are able to help quickly and efficiently and safely get these fossils out of the way of the construction equipment. And they were able to work with some of my teachers at local community colleges, which I appreciated because it was a much more affordable option that still gave me access to those resources that helped further my future in paleontology. And then in the July 1st of 2006, I first joined as a volunteer in the fishbowl laboratory at the Brea Tar Pits Museum. And at the time I was working under Shelley Cox, was my main mentor at that time. And here I have a photo of the current lab manager, Stephanie Potts, working with some of the volunteers as well. And another one of the projects I got to work on at that time was in Pit 91, that you see kind of a peek down into the pit at this time, which is one of the historic excavation sites at the Brea tar pits, where we actually climb down and work on the fossils where a lot of the fresh asphalt is coming up. It looks a lot gooier in this particular picture, just because we are actively working those areas, and we allow the asphalt to kind of seep around and make a protective layer when we aren't actively working in there. But again, it's still going to be silts and sands and clays and gravels underneath that liquid asphalt that you're seeing. And in those areas, I worked a lot with some of the women in this picture I put here, which are Kristen and Andrea, who are some of my leaders there, who then later, when Project 23, the project that I currently work on, became available, I was given the opportunity to become one of their coworkers, and I actually got a paid position at the tar pits. And at the tar pits, so just on this slide, I wanted to point out that this triangle here, I have a highlighted picture in this rectangle here, just a little bit closer view of the fossils in that particular shot, just so you have something pretty to look at while I'm explaining this next part. Because while you can see me here working on them, and I was staff at the time, staff are incredibly few on our particular project just due to constraints. And the overwhelming bulk of our excavation team are made out of volunteers. And these are a couple of my volunteers here, Patrick and Bruce. And many of our volunteers are people who have other full-time careers in completely unrelated projects, or are retirees that have a lot of extra time on their hands that they're looking to spend constructively and in a fun way. And a lot of them are people that kind of come in and really help us do all of our day-to-day work. And I can't wait until we can have them back on site with us again. But really, I think that the opportunity for me starting out as a volunteer and becoming a staff member really gives me an opportunity to see from their side and really appreciate just how much they can understand of what I teach them. And it's a really fantastic opportunity. And so this is that main central fossil deposit from the southern corner of box 1 of Project 23. And they took the entire sections of earth, boxed them up, and moved them over to our side of the park when they were building an underground parking garage next door. Just like we were talking about fossils found on construction sites, both with that whale and with the things at my community colleges, we had that going on here in Los Angeles at the Brea tar pits as well. That's actually how we started out with all of the fossils that are now part of Project 23. And it's also given me the opportunity to really network and branch out and work with a lot of other people and visit other fossil sites. And mostly I've stuck into areas in California and Nevada and Arizona and Utah. And this particular one, I'm actually at the Natalie Quarry that you may have heard Dr. Alyssa Bell from the Dinosaur Institute over at our Natural History Museum talk about 2 weeks ago. And each of these stars is a different dinosaur bone that I'm taking my selfie with. But again, a lot of the same skills that I learned working on fossils in all of these other places are all very translatable. So even though the types of fossils that I'm working on, the ages of them, the types of material or matrix that they're surrounded by is very different, the overall techniques of how we're recording things in space, how we're protecting them, is very translatable from site to site to site. So it's helpful that those skills are very useful everywhere. And here I have another picture. This is a top-down shot of me and one of my colleagues, Carrie, and we're working in box 14 of Project 23 at this one. And I really like the fact that, so this is a top-down view, but then in this other picture here, this is actually what the public sees. So again, we're out in the middle of the park when we're excavating, and so we're kind of the largest exhibit at the museum out in the middle of the public. So we get to talk with people walking their dogs and school kids. And so I'm very excited to get back to that as well. And as you can see on my shirt here is one of our campaigns for a while, was really kind of coming to see what we're digging up in our backyard. But because we're in the middle of Los Angeles, one of the largest cities on the continent, it's a lot of other people's backyards too. And I think that's one of our strengths with the Brea tar pits, is that it's a site-specific institution, that rather than having to go to these faraway places and bring back fossils and share them, which is still amazing and wonderful, there's a special connection that I have with the fossils that are from right here, worked on by people from right here, and shared with people that are right here as well. And it doesn't hurt that a lot of those people that I talk to at events later get inspired to come and volunteer and help me dig. So again, I'm very excited to get back to that shortly. I think give me just a moment for my mouse to fall asleep. And another thing that I missed and I hope to get back to, but I've been excited to kind of extend in a more digital format. This is me with one of my colleagues, Michelle. And to the side here, you see actually a young artist from an elementary school that we went to a career day at that sent us this art representation of the work we were doing. And again, for me, it really brings everything full circle and saying, hey, I am making a difference. You know, these are people that are hopefully going to be my coworkers. And if not my coworkers, then there's still going to be people who are taking these skills and these way to understand the world around them and become more informed and just, you know, better humans in some ways, because again, they have this way to understand the world around them that's just, it's so accessible. And I like to really make sure that everybody knows how accessible it is. And here I have me and a couple of my coworkers. So this is me and my coworker Sean and my coworker Stevie. And so we're currently most of the excavation team staff that are actually out digging in the boxes, working with volunteers. And so I can't wait until we can get this whole team back together again as well. And you can see in the foreground there's another fossil deposit. This is box 13 of Project 23. And again, it's one of those where these kinds of same observational skills that I started using as a small child are just so translatable, and that science is such an excellent tool for understanding the world around us and also then being able to share that. Because if I can describe what I'm looking at in a very organized way, I'm able to then share that with other people on other continents that can't even come visit and see what I'm doing. And I love that opportunity. Yay, science, that's me. And then I have a bonus slide that I add at the end because I am pretty sure that some of you are going to be asking what one of my favorite fossils is. And so I wanted to go ahead and add this slide that one of my favorite fossils is our Capromeryx minor, which is dwarf pronghorn, which is an extinct animal that we have at the tar pits. And if you want to learn more about me, the school programs let me do a fossil finds presentation on them that you can find probably on the same YouTube channel if you're watching this on YouTube later. And they let me kind of cover it for my Valentine's Day this year. So if you want to learn more about it, that's where it is. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now.
Awesome, Laura. Well, thank you so much for taking us through your journey and in your work at the tar pits. We have some really great questions, so I'm going to jump right into them.
Absolutely, thank you.
So Kelsey is curious, and I think a few other students are asking this too. Do you like your job, and is your job fun?
I love my job. Again, Rachel, you smile because you know. I've mentioned it once or twice to you. But the fact that I get to dig up old dead things and dig for buried treasure, hang out with amazing people and get other people excited about science, like it's perfect. It's perfect. And so yes, I absolutely have a lot of fun. And it's definitely one of those things that working more from home, my fingers get a little bit itchy. They're so clean. It's a little bit weird. But I still get to share the science with you all and go through a lot of my old pictures and really try to help tell that story in different ways and share it. So I love opportunities like this too.
So we had a couple of questions about maybe some of your fossil finds that you have personally had the experience of excavating. Aiden and Chloe were curious, kind of what is the most interesting thing that you have found in the asphalt, or the biggest or most unique fossil that you've found?
Absolutely. So most of the fossils that we're working on are about 10 to about 55,000 years old or so here at the tar pits. And they range from everything from seed pods, mouse toes, insect legs, freshwater snail shells, all the way up to tree trunks and mammoths and camels and bison and horses. And just myself, when you include the big fossils and the small fossils, I'm probably not exaggerating when I say that I myself have found tens of thousands of fossils over my last 15 years here. I'm very spoiled. Again, I love my job. I'm very spoiled. So I would say that it would be incredibly hard for me to pick a favorite amongst those. But I would say that the largest individual fossil that I myself have found was actually the rib of a ground sloth. We're looking at something, about actually rhino size, I think would be kind of the closest animal that I can really approximate it to off the top of my head. I'm sure later I'll think of better ones. But their ribs are about this big, which also means that that was very challenging because it was tangled up with tens of thousands of other fossils. So even though we saw it, knew what it was, we weren't able to get it for many months until we finished untangling very carefully all of the other fossils in the way.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. I feel like I've seen a photo of you like in some way holding up, or the scale of that. It's pretty amazing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we had some questions about getting dirty, and it seems like some of our students were noticing that the bones look darker color. They're kind of a brownish tint. Can you speak a little bit to why the bones are that color? And then do you feel like you get dirty when you're working in the asphalt and excavations?
Absolutely. So the way I get dirty, the way fossils get dirty is the same way. So at the La Brea tar pits, most of our fossils are preserved by asphalt. And so our story at the tar pits is oil and water. And the water would have come down off the Santa Monica Mountains and come through as a series of streams that you can't see anymore because we built the city in the way and the weather's a bit different. But the asphalt is still there on site. And it's from an oil field underground, and it comes up as it has for tens of thousands of years. And that crude oil, that asphalt, is what actually gets into all the tiny little spaces in the bones. And that's what both protects it as a fossil through time and also gives it that beautiful La Brea brown color. So this is a cast, this is just a copy, but this is a copy of a saber-toothed cat saber, so that main canine tooth. And as you can see, the root section of it, so even though it's a copy, it's still painted to look like the original. And the root section of it, there's a lot more porous, is a lot darker brown because it absorbs more of that oil in it. Whereas the enamel portion of the tooth, the part that you actually see that sticks out of the jaw, that one, because it's made of much harder materials that doesn't get as much asphalt into it, it tends to be a much lighter color. But most of our fossils are much spongier on the inside with that cancellous tissue. So they tend to have a lot more spaces for that asphalt to come in. But we want to, even when we prepare it in the laboratory to get it ready to be used by researchers, we want to leave as much asphalt inside the fossils as possible, because that's what helps stabilize them for tens of thousands of years and continues to protect them into the future. So even when we clean them, we generally only do preparation of the surfaces, just so the researchers can see everything they're looking at, but the fossil still stays very stable. And yes, I get very dirty, but depends on the area that I'm working in. Especially Project 23 is more of a dusty kind of dirty than an asphalt kind of dirty, because that fresh oil isn't seeping up anymore because it's the entire sections of earth that have been moved over. But it tends to be a much dusty dirty. So I don't wear my beautiful blazer when I'm over there. It's clothes that I wash separately instead.
That makes sense. That's pretty fun, getting dirty on a regular basis. Okay, so we had a couple of questions here. Alexander and Sanvi were curious, have you found a fossil that has never been seen before, or maybe that you're unfamiliar with?
So the thing is, every single grain of sand I move, I'm the first human being ever in the history of everything to see what was behind that grain of sand. So in that way, yes, absolutely. But in many ways, a lot of the newest species that are identified at our site tend to be, and I feel comfortable expressing, I expect to continue to be, a lot of the smaller things. One of the newest species that we didn't know that we had at our site, that we found at our site recently, is actually a little freshwater limpet. I'm just dramatically holding my fingers together. It's terribly small. It's a couple of millimeters, but it's a freshwater limpet. It's a little shelled creature that kind of looks like a little stylized volcano. And that one was actually found stuck to a sloth skull by one of our volunteers inside the laboratory. So again, at the stages of how I'm looking at things, it's less likely that I'll come across things that we've never found. More commonly, I'll come across situations with the geology, with the dirt around it, that's unusual. And that's actually some of the research that's ongoing right now. Actually, yes, today. And as well as sometimes if I find something that's pathological or it has some kind of injury or disease that shows up on the bones, kind of a selfie through time, telling the story of that particular individual animal. Some of those are some of the like new things that I find.
Very cool. Let's see. Henry is wondering, have you ever broken a delicate fossil before?
Ever in 15 years? Absolutely. Do I do it as often as you'd expect? Luckily, no. Because again, the techniques that we're using and the tools that we're using are mostly, especially when we're around the fossils, are mostly small things like dental tools, like the little picks that you'll see sometimes at the dentist's office. So again, when we're around the fossils, we're generally using slow, careful tools and digging in such a way so that the dirt still helps support the fossils as we're working, so that it's less likely, like we don't want to dig on it and just leave it sticking up because then it might snap off, that sort of thing. So our methods help protect those fossils.
Totally, that makes sense. Luis is curious, what does being a scientist during the COVID-19 pandemic look like for you?
For me, it's definitely swung a bit more to my other job title is just science communications liaison. So I definitely have been working a lot more like with our call center at the museum and the amazing people there who take all of these questions from all over and kind of help funnel them to the people who might be able to answer them. So a lot of my opportunities have been through there, programming like this one. And during some parts of the quarantine, we've been able to get back on site because we are outside and have a very minimal staff. So sometimes we're able to do some nice distance masked work out there. But otherwise, I've been doing also a lot of digitization, as well as some microfossil sorting, which is my pretty little setup back here, where I'm actually looking at some of those small fossils out of sediment that already has the bulk of the asphalt rinsed off of it, going ahead and doing some of that work that normally my coworkers would be doing in the laboratory. But I built my own little laboratory in my house.
That's awesome. Love seeing that little behind the scenes of your at-home laboratory. Okay, we maybe have time for one more question, and I'm going to kind of combine two here. Quinn was asking, is there a way that students can get involved in excavation or volunteering at the museum? And Luis was curious, kind of how can a teen that maybe doesn't have a lot of focus in their lives, that maybe can help direct them on how to get involved in science or in STEM fields, become a scientist? So I don't know if you want to take those in two chunks or kind of
I'll see if I can kind of swirl it all up together, because I think kind of addressing that second question and the way that I did it. So again, as you notice, unlike a lot of the other people in this program, I don't have a doctorate. That is not the career path that I happen to follow. It is still a perfectly legitimate one that does all sorts of amazing things, but it's not required to do a lot of amazing things as well. And for me, I think the biggest thing is being able to have opportunities to make it work and volunteer places and really get to try things out. Because of my grandfather, I actually tried out archaeology for a while. That's actually one of my associate's degrees is in anthropology. And I learned that while I find people very interesting and the things that they make very interesting, it was still too narrow a subject for me. I wanted to look at every kind of life ever. And so that's why I kind of brought it into paleontology. But it wasn't until I was actually doing that archaeological work. And actually, that was a class that while I was in high school, I was able to take an archaeology class at the local community college. And that's where I was able to really try it out, got some school credit for it, but also got to really kind of try out that work and see if that specifically was for me. And I really think that actually getting an opportunity to try to do the work that you would want to get paid to do, if you can swing it, is very, very helpful. And did I cover kind of most of that? I know we're close on time, so I just want to make sure there are any large chunks of that questions that I missed.
Yeah, do you ever have students, or how old, I guess, do you have to be in order to volunteer at the Tar Pits, I guess would be the question.
So our volunteer program is on hiatus right now. We've got it on hold because the world. But at the same time, inside the laboratory, the youngest is usually 16. And outside at excavations is usually 18 because you're locked in a cage with me. So for insurance reasons, it's easier. But again, I have from 18 up to about 92. And it's kind of a wide variety of people from a wide variety of backgrounds. And sometimes we're able to actually host a summer field school that's actually for college students specifically. But otherwise, I also get to work with kids at like your adventure and nature camps that our museum puts together, and a lot of those other programs. So it's definitely one of those where I get to work with people through all sorts of things. I'm kind of at a nexus of cool things, and people just bring opportunities to me. And again, I'm very spoiled. But I would say that, again, just find out what you love doing, that you are good at, and then try to find a way to get someone to pay you to do it. And that may be very idealistic, but it worked for me. So who knows? Maybe it can work for you too.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Laura. It was so fun hearing about what you do at the Tar Pits and your passion for science and sharing that passion with others. Really appreciate you spending your time with us this morning.
Thank you so much. Bye, Rachel.
See you later,
Bye,
Laura.
everybody.
I'm going to go ahead and close us out of our program today. Thank you so much to our students and teachers and families who joined us to hear more from Laura. We have more information on our Instagram, which you can follow at the La Brea Tar Pits, or on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/La Brea Tar Pits and Museum, where you can see this recording and others of folks like Laura who work at our museum and in the excavation sites. And you can learn a lot more. I know there were a lot of questions that we didn't get to answer today, so please feel free to check those out and see if you can find out more about what we do at La Brea Tar Pits. We hope you'll sign up for future programs if you're interested. You can visit our website and see all of the classes that we have virtually available right now to students and teachers. We hope you have a lovely rest of your day and week, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks for joining us, everybody.